Good afternoon and welcome to a maybe a little unusual celebration of life, or a little kickoff here for our good friend David Forgan. Dave, as we always refer to him, or other words. But first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody who is joining us via some magical electronics. David and I were famous for not being that savvy, I'll use that word, with electronics. He would forget a password and so on, but through the magic of telecommunications, we have people this evening joining us from Scotland. We'll talk about them in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to have Jim Scott come up. He's going to play a little something on the bagpipes. My grandfather from Glasgow played the bagpipes, so go ahead, Jim. Thank you, Jim. I'm going to start with how I got here today, and then we're going to talk about all the great people in Scotland who have joined us, and his London City Chrysler family, his Wardley Roadhouse family. A few of them joined it, a few of them started earlier today, and most importantly, his own special family. I received a phone call a few days ago from Samantha, or Sam as we call her, and she said, "Jeff, I want to ask a favor." And the next line really got me, because she said, "I'm desperate." And I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "I called Don Cherry, famous hockey guy." David always chuckled at what Cherry would always say on Saturday night and get himself in trouble. But Don Cherry hasn't been out in public, and so he quietly declined. She said, "Well, who else could I get?" And she said, "Well, maybe Trudeau, maybe Justin Trudeau's available." And Trudeau, "No, I'm busy. I'm trying to figure out open borders, closed borders, Delta, COVIDs, and all those." So next call was me. And I said, "Whatever you're going to ask, if it's on behalf of David, I would be most honored and proud." David was very, very special, special to a lot of people. So our Scottish friends, I know it's probably 7 o'clock at night, is that correct? Today, right?
Yes.
Friday the 13th, you had to pick that day. So welcome to Sisters Irene and Jillian, brother-in-laws Kenny and Douglas, and all the nieces and nephews. Sister-in-law Kay and brother-in-law Jimmy, and he'd often talk, Jimmy, that you were like his own real natural brother to him. And all the friends and family that are watching or taking part. And that's just not Scotland. I know there's people all over. I talked to a few people this morning, and they said, "What time is it, and how do I do it?" And away we go. So I said, refer to the funeral home. They'll tell you how to do it. It's not me. Anyway, we talked about David's special friends at the Wardley Roadhouse. I see Dale and Cindy, and the group has joined here, so that's wonderful. And so we're going to touch on a few emotional things, Shirley, as we get kicked off here, and then you're going to come up and say a few things. Are you ready for that?
Oh, I'm ready.
Oh, you're ready. Okay, good. So Shirley, he always talked of, well, as guys, we talk about our wives or our partners fairly frequently. And he said, "Shirley, she's the love of my life. Voice of a songbird. But on Wednesdays, Jeff, don't come knocking." Wednesdays, she ran something called the POW Club. And for the longest time, I never really figured out what the POW Club was. But then I asked. And it meant simply Pissed on Wednesdays. And she'd invite all the girls over, and they'd sit in the backyard, and they'd have a couple of drinks, and they would tell stories. There'd be maybe a few lies or some laughter thrown in. But I don't need to go any further than that. But David would always tell me on Thursdays just what took place. Now, when he could get home, I'm sure he took a little bit, joined in. It's great. To Jason and Samantha and Jared, he would often talk of what was going on in your lives. The kids, the number of kids, and that was more for Jared, and what they were all up to. Griffin, he had a special place for you. I think athletics, and he was a great athlete when he was younger. He hobbled a lot around the showroom when he got older, and we expected that. But we often heard some of his football stories from Scotland. He was always very impressed with what you did in high school and certainly up at Western and joining the Mustangs. But all his grandchildren he was very proud of. He was a very proud papa. Shirley, you're on. Ready?
Do I sing or dance? Do I do anything? Now, this is a short story. Many, many years ago, David and I went to our neighbour's, Sean and Mel's, wedding. My son Jason says, "I'll drive you there." So gets in the car, the gift, all dressed up, and go to the wedding. And it was at the name, Jason, what was the name of it? Honey?
Windermere.
Windermere. Thank you. So we gets there, right? He stops the car, we get out, go into this nice big place, Windermere Hotel. And soon you go in, there was a desk, and you signed your name and you put the gift on the table, which we did. And then we walked to the right, I remember, and there was a bar, free bar, so David had a drink and I got a drink. And we're standing in the corner, we're drinking, and so I don't recognise anybody, so we're drinking away and finished our drink, and I says, well, may as well get another one until we see Sean and Mel, you know, and looked, and just strangers, so we got another drink. Excuse me. So the next thing I says, David, this is weird, I don't see anybody we know. So I walked around and he was standing in a corner, just like a corner. And I says, right, I'll go and see. So I walked over to this table and here seen a picture of the bride and groom. And it wasn't Sean and Mel. He took us to the wrong wedding. And so I went back and told David, I says, David, don't panic. I says, but this isn't Sean and Mel's wedding. He said, what do you mean, what do you mean? With a few choice words, I says, this is somebody else, I don't recognise them. And he says, you're kidding. I says, no, I says, don't panic. He put his drink down and he ran like hell out the door, ran down the driveway, right, and stood, and I stood like an idiot, and I seen a door, so I could see myself doing it, and I walked in this door, it was a big kitchen, and I stood there and I said, there's two people, I says, can we help you? I says, where am I? And they must have thought some crazy woman's walked in. Right, so I says, I'm supposed to be at Sean and Mel's wedding. I says, oh, you're at another place with the same name, very similar name, but Jason got it wrong. So anyway, so he says, right, we'll help you. I says, I don't know where my husband went, so we keep going. And then the next thing, somebody told somebody, next thing, the bride and groom came. And they says, oh, and I told them, before we knew it, we were surrounded by a few people. They says, where's your husband? He says, he ran down there. So the bride and groom went out and they shouted, David, come back, David. Well, you ought to see David, his face, and he had to come back, and I could just see him walking up there and coming into the room standing like this. Oh, anyway, so what happened was the bride and groom says, you know what, we even signed the register, David Forgan. They says, you made it, they took our picture, everything. He says, right, okay, we totally understand what happened. She says, we'll get you a cab, we've ordered you a cab, blah, blah, blah. She says, and they know where you're going to go. I says, thank you so much. So we were friends within 5 minutes. So on the way out, I had to pass the table where you put the gifts. And Dave says, we better get the gifts. So he went over, picked it up, and this guy says, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? He says, I put that gift, no, come on. And he had to get somebody to prove that we were taking our own gift back to take to our real wedding. We got to the wedding, Sean and Mel said, where the hell have you been? You're out. Well, they made David stand on the stage and tell the same story all over again. And that was it.
That's good. Believe it or not, I could tell you the same story from Windermere Manor. We were supposed to be at, what's the one down the way? The estate, Elsie Perrin or something. Jeff Mosher's wedding. We worked with David at Oak Ridge. Same thing. We went in and had a drink and put the gift on the table, and it's exactly the same story. So you're not alone with that. And we didn't meet the bride and groom, thank goodness. So we took the gift and left quickly. Sam, you're going to come up and say a few words.
So I just wrote some words. I called it My Story of David and I. So I met David when I was about 18 years old, and apparently I wasn't that nice to him. He had terrible hair, and he wore terrible suits, and he really wasn't that good looking, I didn't think. But at some point I knew that he was different than the other two boyfriends that you'd had. I knew he was different when he started to go get perms with my mum. He would do anything to make her happy. When I knew that he was a really good man was when it was my brother's wedding and he pawned his Rolex so that we could come over and be at Jason and Grace's wedding. He quickly fit in really well with our family because he was inappropriate like the rest of us. We had so many amazing times and I didn't realise how many until I looked back at all the pictures. A few years after they were together, they had a shotgun wedding because it was the only way he could get in the country. And we made our move to Canada. It wasn't easy at first. We had no jobs, no friends. And he had to be a stepdad to me and my brothers. He had a lot in common with Jared, cars and watches, and with Jason, golf and beer. Him and I like to online shop, and so when he passed, Jared got some watches, Jason got the golf clubs, and I got a bar of soap that I bought him for Father's Day. It didn't take him long to start working the car dealership world, and with that came amazing friends who he was still friends with until this day. He spent many days gossiping. He loved to hear the gossip and all the drama. He would sit with Ali and for hours and talk about all the work drama that was going on with all the young guys there, and he loved it. His other home was the Wortley Roadhouse, and he met amazing people there. He just had a way of fitting in and everybody loved him. He was fairly quiet sometimes, but the Wortley was a huge part of his life. Being a papa meant the world to him. He was also always patient with all our kids, which is not an easy thing to do. He was more than a papa to Griff, and Griffin wouldn't have turned out such the amazing man that he is. Losing Davis has changed my life forever. He never let me down. We had so many secrets, mostly innocent ones. His favourite saying to me was, "Don't tell your mum." We would sit at work, we would order things, he would get the cash, I would have to order my credit card. I'd have to pay tickets for him so my mum wouldn't know. But he would also share his lunch with me sometimes. He would go home and tell my mum that I ate all his chocolate bars and all his snacks, although he had actually given them to all the really cute girls at work. If you ever had the chance to spend time with Mum and David, you know that they were like a comedy act and they should have had their own show. Those are the times I will miss the most. Griff?
Well, over my life, I was fortunate enough to get to know my papa and the person he was, spending my years admiring him. It was him who sparked my deep passion for soccer and sports as a whole. He was the one who founded my love for steak, teaching me that all you need is salt and pepper. He was the first one to cook me a blue steak, and he is and will forever be the reason I order a baseball steak at the Keg. My papa was the first person I ever used a proper curse word in front of. He didn't even bat an eye. He was the one that every Saturday night for years would teach me the ins and outs of a chessboard, and by the end of it, he could not beat me. My papa taught me to love golf, a sport that I'd swear I'd never play. And above all, he taught me to be kind, loving, and respectful. So the most caring, funny, and dedicated guy I knew. Papa, I love you, and you will forever hold a special place in my heart.
It's a tough act to follow. Good job. I just want to say thanks to everyone for attending. It's too bad that there will be a celebration of life in the future when we can open everything up, and we're going to shut the Wortley down for it. I want to thank all my family for all my friends and family for supporting us through this and supporting my mom, Paul and Shelley. You guys have been amazing. I want to thank all the healthcare workers who looked after David. for the past few months. They were unbelievable. The Millard staff here were unbelievable too when they unfortunately had to come to the house. Everyone's just been amazing, right from the medical staff at the hospital, the people who are coming in to see him and look him. I got to spend some time alone with David at the hospital. I would go up and see him every day and just sit for half an hour, and he had a couple of favorite nurses that kind of make sure that I was there for when they were there, if you know what I mean. And we had I don't think I told you, we had this special moment, and we were having this relaxing time, and he so quietly whispered in the mirror that I was his favorite. So, yeah, so it had to be done. Jacob, my son is here. Emily, my daughter, maybe she's watching online, she's way up north. My two boys, Matthew and Colin, they got to see him. James got to see him too, and my ex Dina, they got to see him before he passed. Talking about swearing, Griff, he taught Matthew and Colin how to swear properly too, and they always enjoyed that, and he'd whisper swear words to them, and he'd look at me and I'm like, yeah, go for it. Kay and Jimmy, who can't be here, and all his family in Scotland, thanks for your support. They've been calling, and Jimmy called today, and he was having a pint thinking of David, and called just to say he wishes he was here. We all wish you were here. You guys touched on PW. How I met David was, it came first at Jason and Grace's wedding, and I was going to say that upon the Rolex, and it wouldn't, if we didn't do that, none of this family would be as it is right now. A couple of years ago, my mom was said to him, "You'll get another Rolex, honey, you'll get another Rolex." And so a couple of years ago, he called me and said, "Hey, let's go buy a Rolex." So we went down and we picked it out. And I'm like, "Why didn't you meet her? It was going to be yours one day." So that was our running joke, that once every couple of weeks, I'm like, "You're servicing those watches, right?" So I don't want this big bill when you're servicing them, right? And I even know when he's in the hospital, I'm like, "Where are those watches anyway? Are you in the winder?" So that was bugging me, and he just rolled his eyes at me. David, he was a strong man. He was quiet, sitting in the back, some zingers, but he's mentally strong. You guys have met her family. You need to be. Like, weak-hearted, weak-minded people do not apply. Just dealing with my mom and Samantha on a daily basis, I would have wanted to go years ago, but it was tough. He was a tough guy, and he just sat. He was the yin and the yang. He was the quiet guy that just sat in the corner and waited for the most inappropriate thing to say, and at the time to say it, and then he would say it. Moved on to when they lived in Wortley. They rented their first house on Wortley Road, and some of the best New Year's Eve parties that we throw every year. And there'd be 40, 50 people. There'd be cars parked on the front lawn, and it was just a big family. And as I lived in Old South at the time, and that's kind of why our whole family ended up drawn to Old South, was when I started living here, and then when they moved over, and we always kind of stayed in Old South, and we're all back there. Made some lifelong friends at the Wortley. It was you just walk in there anytime, and he was like Norm and Wortley. My mom went there a week ago, and she said random strangers were come up and hugging her and said, "Sorry for your loss." And she's like, "I don't even know who half these people are." Then we moved to McKay, just the other side of Warncliffe. Some great parties there, and some of the pictures you see up there, we've got pictures from different houses. And there was always a common theme. There was always some kind of party and a couple of beers in there. His work friends that are here right now, I used to see me, I'd come from out of town, I'd stop in, and I'd just walk in, and I'm like, "Hey, Jared," and I'd go sit in his office and shoot the shit, and he'd be like, "Okay, hey, what about this watch?" So we had that common interest in watches and cars. Yes, Jeff, thank you again for doing this. Thanks, gents, for showing up here. The type of person David was, most people know he had an outfit for every occasion. So if you had to sit on the couch and you had to move to the chair, you'd have to go change his outfit. Like, he had to put different shoes on. He had his grass cutting shoes. He had his walk to the Wortley shoes. He had like an outfit for every occasion. Knives and lighters. I've got that issue too. Knickknacks, and you've got my watches have to be placed, and lighters, and those had knickknacks. We were going through some of his drawers, and just random dealership stuff, with Bank of Montreal, everything at Bank of Montreal or something on it. Dry sense of humor, witty, that cheeky little smirky grin he had. Everyone knew if he didn't say anything, you knew what he was thinking. Again, if you didn't love David, it wasn't his problem, it was your problem. Like, everyone loved David. Just one last thing, I say, you can mourn his loss, I just wrote this down, but please celebrate his life and the man he was. He was an amazing man, right up until right up until he passed, he was still, Jacob and I went to see him about a week before he passed in the hospital. And he was still quick-witted and cracking the jokes. And yeah, he will be missed by many. And again, I just want to thank everyone for the support they've given my family, my mom and my sister. Thank you.
Okay, so most of my material has now been used, so this will now will speed up the process. Gail, I know you wanted to come up and say a few things. No, I'm just kidding. We know David loved the Wardley. He enjoyed a pint or two. The group occasionally took the odd holiday. You were telling me about a Grand Bend holiday that you had.
Oh, yeah.
Dale, Cindy, Dan,
Yeah.
Michelle. Surely, of course, you'd be there. There must have been a few fun times there, walking up and down the Grand Bend drag. But surely, you never ever told me who won the bingo game.
It was Mikey.
It was Mikey.
Oh, was it?
Michelle's son.
There we go. I know that Dave loved when the Scottish clan arrived in Canada, and David wasn't. He would say, okay, maybe a month or two earlier, he would say, I'm going to be off for a few days, and then the time would go or be upon us, and he would say, well, I'm off tomorrow and the next day, and probably 3 or 4 days after that, I'll let you know. I said, okay, Dave, that'll work. What's going on? And he says, well, Jimmy and Kay are coming over, and got to spend some time with them, and I think you toured down to Port Stanley and found probably a nice patio or a nice dinner somewhere. And I know the same happened when Charlene came to visit. Jared said it. I thought David was always like a Sean Connery in disguise. He would have different outfits. We'd comment on them, and he always fashioned himself well with, of course, the watches. We knew he liked cars, and I disagree. I think he was a pretty sharp dresser. I do.
No, he wasn't good looking.
Oh, not good looking. He was a good dresser, but not good looking. Okay, great.
When he was younger, he got better.
Yeah. So I said really what made David was his quick wit. He had a saying from chocolate teapots to legs like that would hold up a billiards table, and I can, as I start to recall, I can kind of remember them. Some of them were very appropriate, others maybe a little less, but that was David, and I agree, he probably had to really pick up his socks when he met you, and then this one. Oh my God. You couldn't help smile when David was in the room. He would tell you something very quick, very funny, and you'd find yourself beginning to kind of laugh, and you might be having just not the greatest of days, but you'd go into his office or you'd meet him in the showroom or something, and he would say something that was totally funny, and that's how I will remember him. He will bring a smile to my face every time somebody says David Forgan. I will think of something that he said, something that he did that was truly David. I'm going to tell you a couple LCC quick stories, but I'm going to get a couple other guys up here first. Peter has joined us, and there's a great picture. It didn't make the photo gallery here, Peter, of you golfing. It's kind of funny, but Chris Lake is on holidays this week. Chris said he wanted to come in and say a couple things, and Dan had worked with David the longest. He worked with him at the Ford dealership and certainly at the Chrysler store. So we'll have those two guys come up. And if you need to perform or show any movements, you can stand in front of the lectern if it's more appropriate. That's more so for Dan, but away we go. Who have you flipped a coin to see who's coming up first? Chris. Oh, Samantha's calling for Chris.
Thanks, Sam. That's better. For everybody that doesn't know who I am, my name's Chris Legg, and I worked with Dave for about 14 years, I think, at London City Chrysler, and had a blast with him. There's so many stories I know everybody here has, but certainly it's the London City stories helped to get through some of those work days that could be challenging at times. So he did a great job with that. But I wanted to start off by I have a confession, surely. I slept with David.
It's good to see you're not gay.
And a number of us here slept with David.
One of my stories is me sleeping.
So over all those years that we worked together, we were lucky enough to go to a whole bunch of different events and auto shows and things like that. I'm sure Dave passed on those stories. But the first one that I went to, I think, was like 2012 or something like that. So we all loaded into a party bus and all that kind of good stuff and having a good old time getting there. And it was my first time, so I'm like, wow, this is just such a great time. We get there and they're like, hotels are covered for the night. We're gonna go to this big auto show. We got our suits on and doing our whole thing. So we get to the hotel rooms and check in, and then I realize I'm checking in with David, and David and I are checking in together into the same room. Okay, no problem. I went to university and we all, sleep in as many beds as you need. So, okay, we can get through this. David seemed a little bit annoyed by it. So we get into the bedroom and we have our luggage and there's our bed, and he throws his down there and makes some comment under his breath. And I'm thinking, okay, he's probably not gonna like this so much. Maybe I should be sleeping on the floor, but we'll figure out that later. So we go out, get our suits on, go out to the auto show, get into it a little bit, have a really good night. Not quite sure how we got back to the hotel. Not sure at all, really. But I know we got back and we stumbled into our room, and David goes to one side of the bed and he starts undressing, and so I shut off the lights. The windows were slightly open, the blinds, so you could see a little bit of the street lights were coming in, so still the lights coming in, and on our bed that we're sharing. So he's turned down his side, clothes off, just his underwear. He climbs in and we're kind of staggering there. He gets in, covers up. I go to my side, I undress, do the same, get down. So he's got his back to the middle of the bed. I turn my back to him, and start to fall asleep. Well, a few drinks. So I start to fall asleep, and then I feel this banging around, and the bed's bouncing around, and I'm getting jammed out to the side, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? I look over my shoulder, and Dave's taken all the spare pillows, and he's jamming them down between us. He wants no part of it. And so I'm lying there, I'm like, oh, okay. So I just kind of curl up, and then I'm trying to go back to sleep, and there's some silence, and he says, Legger, I love you, but you're too effing hairy. So that was my first event with David, and certainly he used some different language during that. There was another time, I won't get too far into it all, but with another auto show event where David, I know we've talked about it before, it was like the end of the auto show at night, so it's, I don't know what time it ends, midnight or God only knows what time it is, and we had been walking around with red wine all afternoon, wearing our suits and not doing the whole thing, and there's this one place he wanted us to go and look at, and I don't remember what kind of car it was like an Audi or a Porsche or something like that. Lexus. And he wanted to see this car so badly, and he's like, we have to go up there, and I'm like, David, it's all blocked off, you're not really supposed to walk up there, and we're kind of staggering around, and there's a bunch of us. He goes up to that car, and I believe it had like a white cream interior, and he opens up the door, and he's leaning in, and he's pointing at a few different things, and as he's leaning, all I could hear was the sound it sounded like water, like if you were pouring a glass of water onto a bath mat. And I can hear it dripping, and I think, what is that? And I look, and as he's leaning in the car, his other hand has the glass of red wine, and it's tilted just enough that it's continuously pouring onto the white carpet. I thought, oh my God, David, for God's sakes, what are you doing? Anyway, pulled him out of that situation. We walked away, there was a puddle in there, security didn't look too impressed. And off we went. There's a couple things I know Jeff had mentioned, that there's some work sayings, that we had around work with David, or at least his sayings. And probably the main one that he said, or that we said to him, would be our favorite one, aye. We said the word aye quite a bit. So when David would walk in from the offices at the front, you could see him come in, and he'd walk in with his lunch pail every day, the same walk, same everything, comes in with his lunch pail's there, he's just sort of walking along. And somebody in the corner would yell out, aye, and then David would be like, aye, and somebody else would say, aye, and then David would be like, aye, and he'd walk in and put his lunch away, and our day would move on. The other thing that he used to say all the time when it came down to his job in the business office, which he did a really good job at, we loved working with him, but he was not tech savvy. So in this day of technology, most people in that position will send all their information for approvals and all kinds of credit applications, all goes through different types of software. pops up, sends it out to all the different people that are going to be needing that, like salespeople and managers and all that kind of stuff. Well, David didn't necessarily use that stuff. So when David got through an approval with a client, as a salesperson, you're always happy because he would just walk to his office door and he would say, "Approved!" And everybody in the damn showroom would know what was going on. And the customer could still be standing there. And huh? What? Anyway, it made it fun. We made it fun every day to do that. So that's all I have for today, and I really appreciate being a part of this, and I really appreciated working with him for that time. And clearly has an amazing group of friends for a long period of time, which says an awful lot about him. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Next on the roster is Dan worked with him at Oak Ridge Ford, and he said, "Oh, you like David," when I was moving from Talbot Ford in St. Thomas. We have an interlude here, on top of old spaghetti or something, wasn't it? Anyway, so Dan said, "You'll like this old guy. He's good." And Jeff Mosher was there, and a few other guys. And oh yeah, mask. There we go. It's better off. Anyway, so I met David the first time, and I'd met him previously when he worked with Toyota and so on. And so we got along quite famously. He's a golfer. I'm a golfer. He had an amazing bump and run shot that I could never get him to teach me. He just would knock it right up there and so on. He liked the odd beer. I liked the odd beer. So immediately we were kin at that point in time. So Dan's going to get up, and he we in our managers meetings now with Dan, we time him because the meetings could go endlessly. So so Dan, you're on a time limit here today. Okay, there we go.
No pressure. And I don't have a Rolex. I was very fortunate to meet David in 2003. And so for about 18 years we worked together and just had a great time. Lots of stories. There's not, again, I'm on a time limit. There's not enough time to talk about all the stories. Golf was one of our favorite things. We always golfed tournaments together, car shows. But one of the things, there's two things that for the longest time I didn't know. I forgot my name was Dan because he always called me Little Effer. A little bit more blunt than that. The other part, that when we golf, one of his famous things is that, because I'm not a good golfer, and he always said that I could practice my backswing in a phone booth. And we still laugh about that today, and all the sayings and stuff that he had. But enjoyed working with him, lovely man. We had so much fun together, car shows, different golf tournaments out of town and stuff, and there's been a few pints under as we went along. But I have to do a little demonstration here because one of the most famous things, and I've used it for years, was a joke that he told, and some of you probably have heard it. But I have to kind of do a little bit of a demonstration. But you got to keep, and I always thought he's my Sean Connery, as was mentioned. But he was always the life of the party, but I've used this joke that he told me many times over the years, and it's always brought into laughs. But if you got to imagine Dave with his accent, with his sense of humor, and the way and after he'd had a few drinks, there was no boundaries, there was no filter. He just kind of said it. But he used to tell me this joke about it was Patty and Elizabeth, and Elizabeth had sent Patty down to the pier to buy some snails, and so he goes down, and of course Patty, kind of like David, went to the pub, and he stopped in, and all his mates were there, and they were watching the football, and so he sat at the bar and he started having some pints for a couple hours. Well, after a bit he got pretty well juiced up, and so he stumbles home, and Elizabeth says to him, "Patty, where's the snails? I sent you for snails." And he says, "Oh my God," he says, "I forgot the snails." So he stumbles back down to the docks, and he gets up, and they're closing, and the fellow's there. He says, "Well, I'm all sold out, but I got a few here in this one jar." He says, "You're welcome to them for a couple of quid." And he says, I'll take him. So he gets the jar and he stumbles back up the cobblestone street, and he sees the bar was still open, and there's his mate still in there having some drinks. So he said, I think I'll stop in and I'll have a couple of pints with him. So he puts the jar on the bar and he has a whole bunch more drinks. And he's pretty well hammered by this point. So he says, I gotta get going. Elizabeth's going to be looking for me. So he leaves the bar and he's just staggering one side and up the other on the street getting home. And he goes to get up the steps and he falls backwards and he drops the jar of snails. And it smashes on the front step. Well, Elizabeth comes out and she rips the door open. She says, Patty, where have you been? I sent you to get snails. And he just looks down and he says, come on, Lisa, come on, Lisa. And if you heard him in his accent, tell him about it, and he'd had a few drinks, and it was, I've told that joke for years, and even to my staff, all my technicians and stuff, and they just, it works perfect, so. Anyway, I love David, he was a great mentor to me, and we had so much fun together, and I'll never forget him, so, but thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Sid.
Thank you.
I still laugh at that joke. Oh my God. Okay, a couple of quick stories on my side, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up, and we've got a video to kind of end it, and then Jim is going to play The Flowers of Scotland. I told him on the phone, or Heather it was, Jim, who I spoke with, something about flowers, and I couldn't remember, and I said, maybe Roses of Scotland or something, and she said, quickly corrected me. She said, no, Flowers of Scotland. So Jim will play that.
Flower, one flower.
Oh, just the one.
One flower of Scotland.
And was it a thistle or was it a
It's not flowers, it's flower.
single
Single.
unit? One. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry.
Thanks for the clarification. Jim, I hope there's not two versions, okay? I hope there's not a whole multitude or bouquet, just a single flower is what we're after today. Anyway, I'll wind up, and certainly some of the stories that Chris and Dan have told, or we have laughed about over the years, but one of the better ones was when I hired him. I worked at Oak Ridge. I move around a lot, but I can't hold a job. But I was there just over a year, and so Dan and I left, and we went to London City Chrysler in the East End, and about 4 or 5 months later, he kind of phoned me up one day and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, let's get together. We'll have a beer." "Well, would you like to do that next week, the week after, whenever?" No, today." "Oh, okay. We'll meet today." So we meet in some nice East End location, and so we sit there, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll be here an hour or so. Well, about 3 hours later, I said, "Okay, Dave, I got to get going. And what's going on?" So of course he wanted to come and work with us again. He enjoyed working with the group. And so I said, okay, yeah, your time is pretty good. I'll fit you in, but I still have a person doing that job, and I've got to, kind of, make a few moves and changes and so on. So why don't I call you first next week, and maybe, in a week or so's time, we'll get you started and in. He was at the dealership the next morning at 8:30. I was in a sales meeting. The girl knocked on the door and says, "There's a really nice gentleman wants to see you." I said, "Well, who?" "I think his name's Dave." I'm thinking, it's Saturday morning. I just left the guy last night at 9:30 at night. Saturday morning, 8:30, he's there. I said, "What are you doing?" I come out of my sales meeting, and he goes, "Where's your office?" I said, "Right here." "Could we have a drink?" I said, "David, I got to work all day today. He said, "Oh, I quit. I walked in this morning and quit, and I'm starting on Monday here." I said, "David, boy, you got to give me a couple days here." True confession, you've heard some confessions. We did have a drink. I had a little fridge, and away we go. So that is David. Just to finish Chris's story about the Lexus and the spilled wine, I would never order that car with that beige interior, he says. It should have been equipped with red in it. It was destroyed. We had a young girl start with us, and young and so on, and David worked in finance, and we hired this girl to work in finance. Kim Rose, what was her name, and she came to me after, I think, the second day, and she said, "Jeff, I have a problem with David." And I go, oh boy. He probably said something maybe off color or a little something. And I said, oh, okay, Kim. I said, sure, go ahead, tell me what it is. Well, I can't understand him. And I said, you can't understand him? Yeah, he tells me he speaks English and Scottish. And I said, is there a difference? And no difference, but I really have a hard time understanding that. So I told David that. He about fell off his chair. He said, the wee poor girl, you know. Anyway, last story was a golf trip that we took up north for cancer. My nephew ran a big Marriott hotel up there, and they put on a beautiful tournament at Muskoka Bay Club. Happened to be up there a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling David about it on the phone. We went over and played Taboo, and we had such a great time. We were gone for a couple of days. We could have been gone longer, but I said, David, we should return to London. But we went to the golf course, but on the way up, he had kind of goaded me into driving this Corvette. Well, why don't we take the Corvette that we took on trade? And so we put the top down, and we're driving up, and we're going up past Barrie and Aurelia, and he turned to me, and sure as I was killing myself laughing, and he says, you know, Jeff, people are looking at us in this car with the top down. And I go, okay, that's okay. Do you think we look like a couple of poofers? And I went, okay, baby. But I laughed and laughed at that. But the trip up north, as you get further north, where they start to cut the road through the rock and so on Highway 11, he said, oh my, it reminds me of Scotland. It reminds me of the ruggedness and the wilderness and the trees and rocks. And ironically, he had never been up that way. And so we get to the golf course, beautiful spot. We get over to the Marriott and we check in, very much like Chris's story. We get to our room, open the room, and there's one huge, great big king-size bed. And he goes, oh, maybe we are proofers. I want to tell you though, Chris, that night I slept on the couch. And he had the whole bed to himself. And we certainly had a great time at the golf tournament up there too. So endless amounts of stories. Maybe at the Wortley, when we do that event, we could share a few more of them. Jared's already mentioned the Wortley, so that's to be determined, the date for that. But I'm going to end it this way, and then Jim, you can play that singular Flower of Scotland song in your repertoire. But very typical, when we were at London City together, we would go to a hotel as a whole group of managers, and we would meet there for meetings, uninterrupted, and not a lot of cell phones and so on. And part of it was we would always play a song. And one time I had a young receptionist who was on Canada's Got Talent, so I made her come down and sing the song for us. But it was all to do with, we tied it into what was going on at work. Kind of corny, kind of stupid maybe, but it was, I know the staff really lived for it. Do you think? No. Anyway, there's a song I picked out and a video, and that's why this is up here. And it really speaks to, I think, what made, there's great similarities here between this video and David's life. It is Israel, or Iz, he was called, a small Hawaiian island, rather large boy, played the ukulele. And he was well loved, and a true spirit of Hawaii, and became very famous, quite ironically, but died very early. And I think in our world, David died too early. I would have loved to have sat at 80 or 85 with him in the Wortley, and this young man died at the age of 38. But in the video, you're going to see everybody smiling. The video shows his ashes being spread out, and it's a festival. It's a party. People are smiling. We should remember David that way and all the joy he brought to us. So if we could play the video, and then Jim will take us home. Shirley, you might know this song. Sing along.
Dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. And the dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Ooh, someday wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. And the dream that you did to, oh why can't oh, someday wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dream that you did to, why, oh why can't
There we go.
Nice, eh?
Yeah. It's been rumored there might be a drink at the Wortley for those who can attend. Condolences and
I'll tell David.
yes, just one last quick thing. Thank you for everybody for attending and those online. My phone rang the other night when I was coming back from the north, and it said David Forgan. So I answered it and I said, "Hello, David. How are things going?" And Shirley says, "Jeff, I've got to get this changed. This whole identification on the phone." So remember him in the fondest way, and all the real smiles and joys that he brought to us. So thank you.